Hello YouTubers, this is your friendly neighborhood music reviewer and I am jumping on that bandwagon they call Throwback Thursday. For a long time I've wondered what the hell is it, but I found out and I decided, you know what, this gives me a good excuse to dive into my collection here because I have so many albums and most of them I have reviewed years ago, and because I still keep on reviewing newer albums, I don't get a chance to revisit these old albums, and I know there are a lot of amazing albums there in it. So I decided to use this whole Throwback Thursday idea to bring you on this Thursday a review of an older album that I have reviewed many years ago, or maybe an album that I even haven't reviewed at all, but got a long time ago and still think it is nice to bring to your attention. And I decided to start with an album that I find very beautiful, but at the same time have a very sad feeling with. Because I have in this throwback review, I have Martin Orford's The Old Road. Now, this was the second and last solo album by Martin Orford. Now, do I really have to say who is Martin Orford? I mean, maybe a newer generation will not know him. But for 26 years he has been the keyboard player of IQ. He was even part of them when they were still the Lens. He has been a very important part of Jadis, and he worked with countless other musicians. I had the pleasure of meeting him many years ago, which was very nice. It was one of the first times I went to see Pendragon. He and Gary Chandler did the support act there, and I had a nice chat with him, and I have been keeping in touch with him for a long time through email. And along the way, I mean, he was also very busy with Giant Electric P, the label, of course, from IQ, but also for a lot of other prog bands. And he sent me albums to review, and of course he also sent me his own solo album. And I really loved this album very much. It's a really beautiful album because Martin Orford is a very good songwriter. I have not heard his first solo album, but this one really holds a special place in my heart, and because this album has a lot of meaning. First of all, musically it is absolutely fantastic, and I'm gonna take out the booklet here to tell you the who's who, because it is always a who's who. These solo albums, I mean, just look at them. I mean, Steve Thorn, Cosmograph, Lee Abraham, look at who's joining in, but even albums by Big Big Train, they also have a lot of amazing guest musicians on it. And again, you know, here is the who is who. Of course, we have Mr. Orford there, and here you see all the faces of the people who have joined in. Michael Holmes from IQ, but also Nick DeVigilio, Dave Miros. Back then they were both in Spock's Beard. Andy Edwards, he's been the drummer of IQ for a short while. Gary Chandler, his partner from Jadis, is on it. David Longdon. Now the funny thing is, I heard this album many years before I would listen to Big Big Train, and for some reason I never realized that David Longdon was on this album. And when I heard him with Big Big Train, I really started to enjoy his vocals. I think he's a fantastic singer, and I'm really happy that he's also on this album. Also one of my favorite singers, Steve Thorn, is on this album. But also John Wetton, John Mitchell, you know, from Arena and Frost and a lot of other bands, It Bites. They're on it. What we have more, and we have David Oberle, I'm not familiar with him, and Cole Murphy. That is the cast. And then of course we have Martin Orford playing a lot of different instruments, but also singing. And he has quite a nice voice to listen to, so that is something really nice. But what makes this album so special and sad at the same time, and I have to show you this, and I really hope you can see it. As you can see, this is a railroad, but the end of a railroad. And that is significant for the story behind this album, because this album also marked the departure of Martin Orford from the prog stage. He decided to stop being a full-time musician, and he decided to go and, you know, make use of his time elsewhere. And only a few years ago I had some last email contacts with Martin Orford where he said that most of his gear was stored and he was, well, kind of moving away to the countryside. The same countryside he sings on this album, because the funny thing is, especially when we have that link with David Longdon to Big Big Train, Martin Orford sings already about these places that years later Big Big Train would also make some really beautiful albums about the English countryside, but especially the old road. And well, of course, if you look at the photos here, you know, that is the idea you get with it. And we have some nice photos on the inside as well, some nice artwork, really rusty. And that is also something I really find important. That is what he writes here in the liner notes. First of all, that is something I really appreciate of him. He says this is not a progressive rock album. He said, sure, you'll hear a lot of the trademarks of the golden era of prog rock, but this CD is not about pushing back the boundaries of music. Quite the opposite. It's unashamedly retro and I'm proud of it. Of course, it is inevitable that you will hear, especially the more neo-prog influences. As I said, you know, he's been in IQ for 26 years, he's been in Jadis for many years, making neo-progressive rock. And very beautiful at that. So you hear these influences when you listen to this album. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like a neo, between brackets, prog album. It feels like a very beautiful album. And the same feeling I get with, for example, the music of Big Big Train. You know, it doesn't have to be about pushing boundaries and trying to make some complicated music or anything. No, it has to do with making the music that feels good to you. And this music felt good to Martin Orford, and that makes this album very beautiful. I really love to listen to it. And already the opening track puts you maybe on a bit of a wrong foot, because it starts off with a guitar part that you think, hey man, Brian May is guesting on this album? It's only very short, but it's been done by Martin Orford himself. I was really surprised when I saw who was the guitar player on that particular song, and that was Martin Orford himself. Of course, he does play a lot of beautiful keyboards, a lot of beautiful piano. He has an amazing cast here, also some great singers in it, making some really beautiful music. But the saddest part, and I'm going back to the booklet again, is this small piece here, what he says. He says, no thanks to anyone who uploads or downloads other people's music on the internet. You're making it increasingly difficult to make albums like this one. He wrote that in 2008. That was about 6 years ago. Back then it already affected musicians. Now we are 6 years ahead in the future. We are 6 years ahead with technology. It's become increasingly easier to share your music through internet without having to pay for it. You can download virtually anything, and sadly there are a lot of people who are, for example, buying an album like this, or even it happened that reviewers got a promo copy and uploaded it and started to share it through the internet. That is affecting musicians. A lot of people deny that. Well, deny all you want, it is a fact. And back then in 2008, Martin was at the point that he basically wanted to really move a career into his own direction. Because in 2006 he left Jadis, in 2007 he left IQ, and he wanted to really work on his own solo career. Unfortunately, it didn't last very long because he was really, you know, tired, fed up about the fact that a lot of people who had no respect for the music and were just sharing it and hurting him as a musician. So I was really sad when I heard that he was kind of retiring from music altogether. Fortunately, he didn't retire entirely because he did guest on a couple of albums in the very recent past. So he's still making some music, he still has a bit of a link, fortunately. And of course we have fantastic music to, you know, listen back to what an amazing musician he was. So for that reason I say, if you can find a copy, if you don't have this album, if you can find a copy, I'd say get it. And if you have the album, why not give it a spin and remember what an amazing musician Martin Orford was, still is, hopefully, and remember what an amazing music he did. So that is my Throwback Thursday review for you guys. Martin Orford, The Old Road from 2008. Let's see what next Thursday will bring. Cheers, guys!